Hi, everyone. My name is Adrian Zinove. I'm the co-leader for the Toronto user group. And today is February 20, and we have some distinguished guests, like Hall of Famers in the Tableau world. And this is the second session this year for our user group. And without further ado, so we're gonna start. I mean, this session today is more focused on the tips and tricks. So, and all those like small things that's helping you build better dashboards. And I took you one of your photos, guys, from the internet somewhere, and this one is moving somehow.
Yeah, yeah. That's our glow up, as the kids call it. We had a glow up with
Yeah,
our caricatures this year. So yeah,
yeah.
a little
So
less frumpy and a little
I know you
more
guys
fit.
are you gonna be adding more on from your side. I mean, like on top of like a bio and
Yeah,
occupation, but
we'll introduce ourselves. Yeah, yeah.
yes, and yeah. Okay, so everyone, I think like everyone knows you. So I think like one of the session, like even like my wife was asking like you're gonna have a sessions like with I was like with just go Google like the most famous people in the Tableau world, and she was like, oh, those Flairwash twins. I was like, yes. So yeah, so that's gonna be like a really an amazing opportunity for all of us to get more sneaky peeks on those tips tricks, but also like there's now old tips and tricks. So without further ado, so I'm gonna stop sharing my screen,
All right.
and you guys
Let me
can.
share. And can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, thanks for having us. We are going to be doing our 2024 Tableau Conference content. But quick introductions. Andre already introduced us to a degree, but my name is Kevin Flerledge. This is my identical twin brother, Ken Flerledge. Together we run the website flerledgetwins.com. I think we're at 450 blog posts on flerledgetwins.com, and I would estimate that 445 of them are related to Tableau. We are both consultants for Moxie Analytics. Our titles are Tableau evangelists / consultants. So, and we get to work together every single day. It's pretty awesome. And we are both Hall of Fame Tableau visionaries. I think there are 30 in the world. So we're two of those 30. Great honor there. Ken's been that one for about 2 years. I just lumped in with him this week or last week. So, yeah, I have the same exact GIF up. So we have these little caricatures back when I was holding on to the last bit of hair, and Ken was a little heavier, but we've had what the kids call a glow up, right? At least in our characters, we got a little bit more in shape. I lost some hair, but got a little bit more in shape, and so we figured we'd update the caricatures as well. Moxie Analytics is a small but mighty team of 5 where we do things like data governance, data management, AI readiness, training and community building, and of course, data visualization. Ken and I focus 100% on doing Tableau work. So we do, we build dashboards. We do something called a fractional data hero, where you can actually just kind of get us on retainer for X number of hours a week. If you have a sticky problem, you just need an hour, you can do our Tableau Lifeline service, and we do all kinds of data visualization training, including a beginner boot camp, which is coming soon to being online and self-paced and significantly cheaper than our live boot camp. We have I think, one-of-a-kind advanced Tableau boot camp where we really get into some detail about advanced techniques, advanced charts, calculations, and talk about some design techniques and some just things that are really essential to getting good with the software and getting good at data visualization. And then softer side of data visualization, we have one of these coming up next week. This is soft skills. This is understanding your audience, having empathy, best practices, lots of time spent on best practices. And then we get into storytelling, and we call it the 4 Ps of data storytelling. Great. My favorite course that we offer. I love Tableau, but this is my favorite course that we offer. Lots of fun content in there. So, and much cheaper than the boot camp as well. So if you're interested, again, we have one starting up next week. Fun fact, this is interesting because I've told this only to a few other people, but this is the Toronto TUG. I don't know that I've ever mentioned this to you. I don't know why, but Ken and I actually are originally from Toronto. We moved here when we were in our late 20s, moved to the States. So, and you may not know, this is, again, fun fact, that Ken and I played on on Canada's national dodgeball team. This is the 2010 World Championships. You can see a couple of ball guys there. In a second, you'll see Ken make the incredible acrobatic move. He still gets hit. So yeah, so we're good at Tableau and at dodgeball, and at completely lying. There's none of that is true at all. I was born in the same city I live in now. So, okay, that was ridiculous. All right, let's move on. You've hopefully seen us at the Tableau Conference in the past. This is from 2023, and this one is from 2024. You may have heard us talk about this story. If you came to the Tableau Conference presentation, you probably heard us tell this story of when we met Serena. Serena Roberts is the COO of Moxie Analytics, and we met her back in TC22. And we tell this long story, the last two Tableau Conferences. I'm going to tell the whole story. I'll tell the abbreviated version, but we went for this long walk, and we were at this party, and we went for this long walk. And then this ended up in the infamous ham sandwich wipeout of 2022. Serena, while walking, literally stepped in the middle of the sidewalk on a very greasy ham sandwich and slipped and was pretty much sprawled out on the ground like this. It was a wild experience. We made sure she was okay, and then we pointed and laughed. And then the next year, we had some people join us. You might know Josh and George and the Sarah Bartlett. Well, they joined us, and they went on this long walk. And this year we were on the quest for this drink called a bramble, and we couldn't find it anywhere. We just kept going into bars after bar after bar. Well, I told this big, long story of the last 2 years. This story is, in fact, to be continued. So if you're coming to the Tableau Conference and you want to hear some really cool tips in Tableau, but also hear kind of what happened next with that story, certainly come check us out. We're doing how to do cool stuff in Tableau. We've done it the last 3 years. This will be our 4th year, and different content, tips, tricks, techniques, this kind of the same general feel of what we're doing now, just completely new content. So let's get to the tips and tricks today. We're gonna move fast, but don't take notes. Toronto TUG is recording. It's also on demand at Salesforce Plus. That's a free login. And then all the content associated with it, blog posts and etc., you can get at flerledgetwins.com/coolstuff2024. Before we get into that, thanks to an awesome community, the tips that you're going to see today, some of them came directly from the folks shown on screen. Some of them were inspired by the folks on screen. Everything that we do is inspired by our awesome data community. We've learned so much over the last 8-9 years from them. So just wanted to say thank you to those people and everyone out there. So without further ado, we're going to jump in. Ken, I'm going to pass it to you now, and you can start going through your 2 sections. He'll do 2 sections, then I'll do 2 sections and wrap us up.
Yep. Let me figure out how to share on this thing. All right. Oh, can you see Tableau?
We can. Yep.
All right. Great. Okay. So my first section is going to be a little abbreviated. If you saw this session at the conference last year, I showed a tip about using filter values to pass filters from one sheet to another. And since I did that, it seems to be broken on Tableau Cloud. So I don't want to encourage people to show this really cool thing and then just for you to find that it's broken. So we'll kind of cut that one out. So just got start off with a couple of cool things that you can do with filters that maybe you're not aware of that you can do with filters, right? So starting off here, I have some bowling data. Kevin's son, when he was in high school, played bowling and was, one of their top bowlers. And so Kevin tracked some bowling data for the coach and helped them to sort of analyze it and created a really nice dashboard for it. But here we have sort of each player, the match number, the opponent, the date, and then the scores in their 2 games that they played. So, maybe we want to be able to filter this down by date, right? So I can obviously drag out date and filter it. I'm just going to choose individual dates. Let's do all of these and show that filter. And now, of course, my user can filter to whichever dates they want, right? But a lot of times, and depending on your use case, you might just want them to have the ability might want to just default to that last date in the data set, right? So here they have to kind of go through and manually select that. And then as soon as another date comes in, they have to change it again, right? So it'd be nice if we could just default to it. Well, for me in the past, typically I'm doing like changes to parameters, and I'm doing dynamic parameters to get the last date and things like that, until Kevin showed me that there's a much easier way to do it. So if we edit this filter, and down here at the bottom, which I don't think I ever saw before, is a filter the latest date when the workbook is opened. And so when you do that, it'll automatically just filter down to the last date. If a new date comes in here, when I open that workbook, it'll just automatically default to that. But my users still have the ability to go back and turn on additional dates. Just a really nice little handy feature that you might not be aware of. It works with other date levels as well. So if I were to do this, say, by month and year and do filter to the latest date, it will filter down to, in this case, April. But as soon as May dates come in there, I'd see May as well, right? So really, really handy little filter trick that you can use. Here we have some fake superstore stock price data. And, if you've ever looked at stocks online on Google or something like that, right, there's usually a little handy thing to say, let me show me 5 years, show me 1 year, whatever. And I already blew this because I already started this. Change it back to range dates. But showing those blocks of dates can be a little bit tricky in Tableau, particularly when you do like these range filters like this. Because, if I want to go last 5 years, maybe I'm coming in here and going and trying to find wherever that cutoff is, or I'm fiddling with these ranges until I get the last 5 years or whatever, right? And it's just kind of not an easy process to do. So another, I think, underused feature in Tableau is this browse periods option for date filters. And when we turn that on, we automatically get these just pre-configured periods based on that date field. I can look at 5 years, I can look at 1 year, 3 months, 1 month, whatever, and I can just really easily focus in on a period of time without having to exactly sort of drag those range things as is. Great for this type of chart when you just want to get a sort of snapshot of a certain period of time. Okay, so that's all for filters. Let's switch our attention to the order of operations. So I've written about this. I've talked about it a lot. I think the order of operations in Tableau is one of the most important things that people should know and be aware of. Pretty much anytime you're working with Tableau, this order of operations is going to come into play. And, I certainly not so much anymore, but I used to spend a lot of time on the forums, along with Adrian spends a lot of time on the forums as well. And I think he would agree that one of the most common problems, most common issues we see are people getting confused with these order of operations, right? So I want to make sure we spend some time. I want to spend some time going through what the order of operations is, as well as give you some of the more common sort of problems that you'll run into, as well as some tricks and sort of hacks that we can use with the order of operations. And I kind of call that bending the order of operations to your will. So the order of operations is just the order in which different kinds of things compute in Tableau. And a lot of it's filters, but we also have certain types of calculated fields like LODs and table calcs and things like that, right? And also reference lines, trend lines. So at the top is the very first thing that computes, extract filters. That has to compute before the extract is ever created, right? So obviously that happens first. Then we have data source filters. And then as we go down, we have the order in which everything else sort of computes. So I recommend people find this, print it out, pin it up on your wall. And anytime you're working through Tableau, particularly if something seems to be doing something weird, refer to that order of operations and see what you're using and understand what's happening in what order. So with that, let's talk about some of the more common order of operations problems I have run into. One of those is fixed LOD. So pretty much everyone, when they start using fixed level of detail calculations, will run into this problem and be confused and wonder what's going on. So here we have a chart showing our customer name and their first order date. And the first order date uses a level of detail calculation. So it just fixes on that customer name and gets the min order date. So the first time they ordered any product, right? But I might want to be able to filter this. So I can see when they first bought any product, but I might want to be able to see when they bought a specific product. So I've added a filter to category. And if I start unchecking these, maybe I just want to see technology. No matter what I do in this filter, those dates aren't changing, right? So when something illogical like this happens, again, it's sort of a good indicator that maybe we have an order of operations problem. So what I like to do is look at the order of operations and see which of those things that are being used, right? So here I've highlighted what I'm using. I've got that fixed LOD getting the minimum order date by customer, and that category filter is a dimension filter. So what's happening here? Well, you can see that fixed LOD is computing first. So what it's doing is it's looking at the entire data set, grabbing the minimum order date, the first order date for each of those customers. So it now has that order date, right? Oh, and then afterward, that dimension filter is computing. So it's then taking that data that we already have and filtering by category. So essentially, it's just going to remove anybody who didn't buy those products that I specified. But it's not going to have any impact on that date because the date computed first. That doesn't really make sense in this case. What I really want is to be able to filter on the category and then get the first order date for that customer's purchases of that category. So we really want that filter to compute before the fixed LOD. And to do that, we can take that filter and turn it into a context filter because context filters compute before fixed level of detail calculations. So to do that, we come over here, we right-click this filter, do add to context. And now you'll see as I change these, my dates also change, and we're seeing more relevant dates to that specific category. Again, I think this is probably the most common problem I see with the order of operations. When you start messing with fixed LOD calculations, you're really going to have to deal with that order of operations probably more than any other type of operation. Another common one I see are top-end filters. So here we have sales by customer, and I've put a top 15 filter on the customer name, right? So I'm just going to get my top 15 customers and their sales, and this looks great, right? But again, this is looking at the entire data set. Maybe I would like to filter down by year. So I added a filter on the year of order date, and let's just filter to 2021 and see what happens. So I filtered to 2021, and instead of 15 customers, I now have 12. So that doesn't seem right. The only way that should happen is if only 12 customers bought products in 2021. And I know that's not true. I know I've got more than 15 customers. The other thing I see that's weird are these bottom ones that are really low. Like this doesn't make sense that our 12th biggest customer only bought $271. So, just with some basic sanity checks here, I know that something is a little bit awry with this data. Let's switch this back to show all, and then let's take a look at the order of operations. Well, this looks similar to the prior screen because top-end filters compute along the same time as fixed LODs. So top-end filter is computing first, and then that dimension filter on year, right? So if we think about what's happening from a data standpoint, is we've got the entire data set, and we're grabbing the top 15 customers for all years, right? We're not to that filter yet. We're grabbing the top 15 customers for all years, and then we're doing the year filter. So what's happening is we're getting the top 15 customers overall, and then we're filtering down to just 2021. So what's happening here, it's showing the 12 customers, is 3 of those 15 top 15 overall customers had no sales in 2021. So they drop off that list when the dimension filter comes in. And some of those small ones had very few sales in 2021. So again, I think what we really probably want to do is do that filter on the year first so that we can see the top 15 customers in 2021 specifically. And how do we do that? Well, we change that to a context filter. So let's go back and do that. Let's change this year filter to a context filter. And now if we filter to 2021, we'll see 15 customers and numbers that seem much more reasonable, right? So anytime we're using those top end filters, we need to be really careful with our order of operations. Again, this is a really common one that I see all the time on the forums and elsewhere. All right, so let's get into some slightly more complicated things. Here I have a list of our cities and cities and states in Superstore, and I think, well, we probably have some Canadian stuff in here as well, although they are dwarfed by the U.S. sales, I guess. So, and we've got this sorted by the highest number of sales for each city and state, right, or city and province. And I live in Pennsylvania, so I'd like to kind of filter in on Pennsylvania and see what's going on there, right? So I have a filter on state and province, and I choose Pennsylvania, and I don't know what that's doing. And then it filters down to Pennsylvania and ranks those. But it re-ranks those. It re-ranks those within Pennsylvania, right? So Philadelphia is the biggest within Pennsylvania. But what I'd really like to be able to see is how did Philadelphia rank amongst the entire data set? I want to filter down to Pennsylvania, but I want to see that original rank. I want to see that number 5 for Philadelphia and whatever all the other cities are. So again, if we look at our order of operations, what we have right now is a dimension filter on state. And then we have so this number is using a rank, which is a table calculation. I can show that calc real quick. It's just a rank of the sum of sales. So that's a table calc. So that dimension filter is computing first. It's filtering the data set down to just Pennsylvania. And then it's ranking each of those cities within that data set. But what I want to do, again, I want to do the rank first, right? So that I can get it overall for the whole data set, and then filter down to just Pennsylvania so that I can see those overall ranks. And the only real way to do that is to somehow force that calculation, that filter, to be a table calc filter, because table calc filters compute after table calcs. So here's a cool little trick for doing that. If we come over here, we're going to create a calculated field. I learned this from Pooja Gandhi. I learned it on the forums. So this is going to be a bit of a plug for the forums. If you don't use the forums, there's a wealth of knowledge out there. You can learn so much from it. So essentially, we're doing lookup. Lookup is a table calculation. It allows us to go sort of forward or backward in our data set based on this field here, this offset. So we're setting the offset to 0. So basically, just give me back the state and province, essentially, is what this is doing. So this is just going to return the same value as state province, but it's going to turn it into a table calculation. And when I use this as a filter, let's get rid of that filter. If I use this as a filter, let's just do all for now. Let's show this filter. Let's turn this into a single value. And when I use this as a filter, it's now a table calc filter that computes after the table calculation. So if I filter to Pennsylvania, you'll see it keeps those overall ranks. It does the rank first out of the entire data set, and then it filters down just to Pennsylvania. That's not a trick you're going to use all the time, but when you need to use it, you're going to be like, oh, I know how to do this because I saw it done before. And it's just about the only way you can do this kind of thing in Tableau. Let's do another one with table calculations, sort of similar, but different. We can use table calculations to create these these bands, these big angry numbers, or the A might mean something else depending on who you're with. And so if we think about how we might want to create this, well, we might want to, sorry, this is basically showing sales growth from 2022 to 2023. So if we think about how we might want to make this and sort of break it down into steps, we can start off with a chart that shows, a row for each year, the sales, and then we do a table calculation. You see we've got a quick table calculation on here that does percent of difference, right? So it's showing that percent of difference between these two values. And ultimately what we want to do is just sort of isolate this number, this 30 here, and get rid of everything else. So logically, well, maybe we just add year as a filter and remove 2022, right? And then we can hide these other things. As soon as we do that, though, that 30 goes away, that table count goes away. So again, let's refer to the order of operations, see what's happening. This is a table calc, and this year and order date, I don't know what city state's doing on there. This year of order date is a dimension filter, right? So dimension filter on the year order date and our table calculation for the percent difference. So it's, as soon as we click that filter to remove 2022, it's filtering down just to 2023, and there's nothing for it to compute that percent difference for, because there's only one row, essentially one row of data there. But what we can do is, just like we did before, is force the use of a table calc filter. Now we could do something very similar to what we did in that last one and use lookup, but we can also use this really handy function last. So I'm going to drag last up onto the view so you can see what it's doing. So this is just saying if last equals true, 0, then true, otherwise false. And last is just going to count basically the rows. The last row in our value is going to, in our table is, or in our data here, is going to be 0. So in this case, that's true. The next to last will be 1. If there were previous rows, it'd be 2, 3, 4, etc. It just counts from the last row. There's also first, which counts from the first row. So what we're going to do is use last, and this is a table calc, remember. So we're going to put last on the filters and filter true. And because that's a table calc filter, it computes after this percent difference table calculation, and it keeps that value, right? So it's a way of getting rid of that 2022 without doing it before the table calculation computes. And then from here, we can hide the header on the year. We can turn off the sales measure, hide this header. Let's make this entire view and size it up. And now we have our percent difference band, nice and easy. Well, maybe not particularly easy, but just kind of an interesting way to create these bands using some table calculation tricks. And with that, I am done. I'm going to hand over to Kevin.
Anybody care if I just go off script for a minute? I'm going to go off script because I don't know who asked the question. Ken showed the last, checking that checkbox on the filter to pick the last date, and someone in the chat, forgive me, I don't remember who it was, said, "Can we do this with parameters?" We can do this with date parameters, and this is called a dynamic parameter. So let me just address that, and then I'll get into the normal presentation. So bonus tips here. See my screen? I can't hear anybody, so perfect. Okay. Yeah. Or I can't see anybody. So here we have this example of this data set where it's got this bunch of dates, right? And they only go up to February of 2024. So if we were to, extract and do a refresh, it wants me to go find the file, throw that over here and find that file real quick. One sec. Dynamic parameters. So I'm refreshing this extract, and it's exactly what I didn't want to do. So I wasn't prepared. So let me back up. Let's first create some parameters. Sorry. So I'm going to create two parameters. I'm going to create what I call a static parameter and a dynamic parameter for these dates. So let's just do that. I'm going to right click, create parameter. If I do it that way, I get this I get this parameter, this date parameter. I'm going to call it static. And so it's a list. I have this already in existence. I've done this before. So it's a list parameter, and it includes all these different dates, right? All the dates in my data, all the way up to February 2024, right? So let's show that parameter. Got a new mouse, new keyboard, and nothing's working like I want it to. All right, so now let's create a different parameter. I'm going to do the exact same thing. Let's call this one dynamic. It's probably going to yell at me as well. New. And then instead of just have this fixed thing checked, which is default, I'm going to check this box that says when workbook opens, and then we're going to feed in this date. So the difference between this is fixed. This is a fixed list. If you wanted to add a new value to your parameter, you have to go in there and manually add a new value to your parameter. We used to have to do this every time the new month's data came in. I had to go in and add a new parameter. Now there's dynamic parameters. I can check this box here and says when workbook opens, just feed in this field. So what happens here is this will feed in dynamically any date that is dropped into my data. So if I get March, April, May of 2024, this dynamic parameter will automatically update with that data. Okay, so let's show that parameter. We've got the static one here, the dynamic one right now. They're identical, right? Exactly the same. Now let's do that extract refresh because my data has more in it. You can't see me picking it here, but dynamic parameters data. It's going to update here. And you see now we have these new dates, right? It used to end at February 2024. Now we have all these new dates. And if I go look at my static parameter, right, we still have, it ends in February 2021, just like it was before. It's just this static list that I entered. But if I go to my dynamic parameter, you can see there's a scroll bar. We now have all these other values added to it, right? So now that I refresh my data, this thing's feeding in this date field and it's picking up all those different values, right? So the question wasn't how we can feed in dynamically, but they're tied together. But how do we actually make this default to the most recent, just like Ken did with the filter? So how do we make this default to the most recent data? Do that with setting up a dynamic parameter and then feeding in a value when workbook opens. So value when workbook opens. When you do this, it has to be, generally speaking, it has to be a fixed LOD. So what we're going to do is create a fixed LOD to calculate the last date, and then we'll feed that value in as a dynamic parameter. Okay. So let's do that. Let's create. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to back up and let's get that data unrefreshed. All right, so now it's back to 2.1. So let's create a calculation. Max, I'll just call it max date. And we're just going to be fixed. Very simple, fixed, max date. Just going to say, give me the max date as a fixed LOD for everything in this data. Give me the max date. So now let's go back to this. Okay, well, doesn't matter. Then we hit edit parameter. And then what we're just going to do is check this value when workbook opens. Let's go date and we'll feed in this max date. Hit OK. It's right now it's set to February 1st, 2024. Right. But now if I refresh this extract, yes, it wants me to again. Watch what happens with this parameter. It updates, not only updates those values, but it defaulted to the most recent date in our view. So answer your question, yes, you can set parameters to do the same exact thing that you can do with filters. And in fact, I think most people are kind of used to doing it with parameters more so than they are with filters, because honestly, I think a lot of people knew that other thing existed. So, all right. So that answered one question in the chat. I'm going to be doing some cool stuff to keep it simple, right? So let's start off with this data set. It's just an order number and a profit value. That's my simple data set. So my starting point would oftentimes be a dot strip plot where I've got profit out on columns and order number on detail. And I get this strip and we can see, okay, yeah, we got some outliers, but what I also see is there's a bunch of them right here. Below 50, there's like 25 items. So what I might do is random create it instead of just stacking these on top of each other. I might create what we call a jitter plot. So I might just do random here, right? And it's going to randomize these. Maybe I may make them a little bit bigger. Now we have less stacking of those marks on top of each other. We can see the distribution of dots. I can hover over them, right? Okay, that's nice, but there's so often that we run into this problem with the random function. It's a hidden function in Tableau. It can only be used with file-based data sources and extracts. And I have always run into problems. You're moving from live to extract, or you're, connecting. You have to have a live data source. And I always, almost every single time I use random in a business setting, I end up having a because it won't work with certain data sources. So, so what I end up doing is going to Jeff Schaefer's blog post on data plus science. He wrote this thing 11 years ago, 10 and a half years ago in 2014. And he talks about these different ways of creating a random function in Tableau. And you can do the random thing if it allows it, or you can use these calculations that he shows us. This is the first one. I don't know if he came up with this himself, but he's a genius if he did. Previous value of min of huge numbers multiplied by huge numbers modulo 2 to the 24th. Like, I have no idea why this creates some sort of random number. So you got to create this random number function, and then you create this random int function, and that takes that random number and does a bunch of other wild stuff to it. Okay, I have absolutely no idea why this works, but this table calculation can be then thrown on rows, and then we compute it using order number, and we get basically the same thing we just showed, right? So we can use that random over here, or we use his pseudo random number generator here. But for me, I like to call it efficiency. Ken likes to call it laziness. But I just think I don't want to create all these calculations. I don't want to go to his website. No offense, Jeff. I just want to just do something really simple. So I'm going to totally cheat. And since this order number is a number, you see it's a number, I'm going to drag it up here. It's not going to be one yet. And then I'm just going to do an inline calculation of this. And I'm going to take the sign, like the mathematical sign, like sine and cosine. I'm just going to take the sign of the number. And we essentially get the same randomization just by taking some weird mathematical function of this order number. It's going to spread them out. I used to do this with pretty much every jitter plot that I ever created in my old company. All right, here's an example of some of a I did. It was looking at New Year's resolutions at the beginning of 2024, and it was asking men and women what their New Year's resolutions were, and they would show the percentage of how many answered the specific answer. So doing more exercise or improving fitness. About 49% of men said they'd like to do that, and 61% of women said they wanted to do that. Well, this data came in as not as decimals, as a percentage should be, but as whole numbers. So what I should do is just take that whole number of 18 and divide it by 100, and then format it as a percentage. I should do that. I admit that, but I'm lazy again. This one's not efficiency. This one's laziness. So I can go to these calculations and right click, go to default format, number format, and I could change the formatting. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cheat and see this prefix suffix. I'm just going to put a percentage behind it. Boom. And now all of a sudden this looks like a percentage. It is in fact a whole number with just a percentage symbol after it. So if this is all I'm working with, then that would work perfectly fine. Now, if you look at currency, when we look at currency, this is in fact the exact same thing Tableau does automatically. So if I go to format here and I change this to currency, what happens is all they're doing is adding this $sign as a prefix. Nothing more. There's nothing fancy about it. They're just literally adding in this prefix here. So it's exactly the same thing as I did here, except they're adding a $sign. And that $sign isn't affecting the math or anything like that. It's not turning this thing into a string. It's just displaying this thing, just like this isn't a string. It's a number with this thing behind it. So other use cases for it in a visualization recently where we're looking at different countries. We're looking at their population in 1950, then looking at their population in 2021, and we look at how that changed. So for this country, it's a third of what it was. For the United States, it's almost 2.5 times as big. And for Jordan, it's 25 times, right? Jordan has 25 times the population in 1950. This ratio feels fine, but I'd like to just make it even more clear. So I'm going to go to default properties on ratio, go to number format, and I'm just going to add a space here, add a little x. I want lowercase x. And what that's going to do is just add that x to the end. It's still a number, but it just displays this x. So it's very clear that the population in 2021 is 25 times that, right? 25 times that. Some other things you can do with formatting. One of them is in a diverging bar chart. This is that same New Year's resolution data. I visualize it in a different way. I would consider this an inferior way than what I did, but it's just a diverging bar chart where we have the male percentage over here and the female percentage over here. In order to build that that diverging bar chart, we've go to this. We're taking these positive percentages, right? You can't have a negative percentage of women, right? We take these positive percentage and we just make it a negative. In fact, all I've done is take this and actually did the real math this time, but I just took and made the female percentage negative. And the reason we do that is to make this bar go to the left, right? All we're doing is making this bar go to the left by making it negative. The problem is, if we probably should direct label these bars, but if we didn't, we have this axis that shows a negative, right? And that is not very valuable. It makes no sense, confusing to the end user for them to think that the answer to this one is negative 59%. Doesn't make any sense. So something we can do with formatting is right click and choose format. And I'm going to go to axis here. And then I'm going to go to numbers here. We've selected, the first step is always to select some type of formatting in here. You just can't leave it automatic. And then when you come to this field, and it's a little bit small, but you're going to see this format. It just says 0%. But if we were to change this to a currency and then come to custom, you're going to see a bunch of stuff. But the one key thing you're going to see is there's a semicolon, right? What the semicolon does is separate. It shows first the positive numbers and next the negative numbers. That's the formatting for this number. You can see we just have a $sign and some decimals. And then here we have the parentheses to represent negative. In fact, you can see them in the axis now. So anything before the semicolon is a positive. Anything after the semicolon is a negative. So if we go to percentage here, and let's change this to 0, then go to custom. If we add a semicolon, then we can show the format of the negative number. I'm just going to paste in that 0% here. Actually, let's make it a negative. So you can see it's a negative here. If I get rid of the negative, this thing now shows as a positive. The number is in fact a negative, but we're displaying it as a positive. And so before the semicolon is the positive numbers, after the semicolon is the negative numbers. If we add another semicolon, that will represent the 0 value. You can see here 0 here and 0 here showing twice. If we want to just get rid of this and say we didn't want it at all, I can just put a space and that thing disappears. Or if we want to say like Ken's a loser, he's a real 0, we could type in Ken and it displays Ken. So in this formatting box, you can do all kinds of fun custom formatting. I'll show you another use case here in a moment. Right now, actually. So here I have the way I typically like to build actuals versus target charts. I'll show the actuals and then I'll just show a target line, right? And then I'll color code based on whether they hit the target or not. So these have exceeded the target. These are under the target. They're red. And then I've added this calculation in here that says how far above the target or below the target am I? I got this arrow that says I'm 44,000 above. Here, I'm 67,000 below the target. So how might we create? First, I'm going to create a calculation that just takes the difference between the sales and the target. And then you see there's no negatives and positives. There's just these symbols. So I would next take the absolute value of what I just did. And then I got to create a calculation to create these little symbols. By the way, if you just hit hold the Alt key and type 30. That's going to make the up one, Alt 31 for this one. So if the difference is 0, then we don't want any symbol. If the sales is greater than target, then you want this. If the sales is less than target, you want this, right? So, okay, so let's just go to a clean sheet and let's add that. So we're going to add this to the label, and then we're going to add this to the label, and then it puts it on different rows. Arg. All right, so back that up. Boom. Maybe put a space in front of it. Okay, we've done it. It took us 3 calculations and some time to do that. But like I said, I'm efficient, aka lazy. We can do that with 1 calculation and keep this a lot simpler. So I'm going to just go to the very first calculation we created, just the difference, right? We didn't take the absolute value. We didn't create a calculation for the markers. I'm going to right click and go default properties, number format. It's set to currency, but let's go to custom. Again, everything before the semicolon is a positive. Everything after the semicolon is a negative. So if it's positive, I want the up arrow. I'm going to hold Alt and type 30. It's going to add that arrow. If it's negative, I want the down arrow. I'm going to get rid of the parentheses, hit Alt 31 for the down arrow, and we'll just won't worry about the 0. Now I have this calculation with the default formatting built in. If I just drag that to the target, to the label, we now have that built right into the calculation. We can drag that anywhere, and instead of a negative, it's going to have a down arrow, and instead of a positive, it's going to have an up arrow. I do this constantly all the time with KPIs where I can show that up and down arrow, and I don't need any just need the 1 calculation to do it. All right, we have 10 minutes left. Let's get into some random stuff. Hopefully we have time to wrap up. Thought we cut a couple tips out, and I thought we'd be way under time, but I guess throwing in some ad hoc stuff got us slowed. All right, here's that same New Year's resolution data. Remember, I was talking about the percentages, but I've got this this barbell chart. So I have this circle mark, right, sized for, and then we got 1 for male, 1 for female. And then to make this background, what I have is a line mark, right? And in fact, it just really the opacity's turned way down. Like you can see that this is just a line connecting these 2 dots, right? But in my final dashboard, it looks like this. You see the difference, right? This line mark is much thicker, right? But if I come to this line mark, I've got this thing as large as it can be. I can make it smaller, and okay, maybe that looks good, but I want to make it bigger, and I can't seem to do that. A little trick, you want to make some of your marks bigger. This doesn't always work, but if you type average of 1 here, hit enter, and just put that on detail, and then drag that onto size, boom, this thing's now gigantic. And now I can size it down to be what I want. And that's exactly how I built this initially, right? So adding average of 1 to 0 will help you size up the marks. Okay, so we have this use case where I'm looking at subcategory and sales by subcategory. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to, look at the return values. So we've got all these orders, and then we have these red ones. Those are the ones that were returned. What if I want to look at this by segment as well? So let's add segment to color. Maybe it might be a little too much. It is a little too much, but what if we wanted to do it? Let's add segment there. Well, shoot, I had returned on there. I had segment as well, and now it's just segment. Let's try that again. Maybe I did something wrong. Let me add returned to color as well. And you see what's happening. Every time I try to drag a new field onto color, I want multiple fields on color, but what happens is it just replaces it. Well, there are ways to add multiple fields to the color card. The first one is we've got returned on here now. If I drag segment onto detail, then you can actually click this little icon here. We change it to color, and now we have multiple fields on the color card. And what you'll see is it essentially creates this combined field. The blues are ones that weren't returned, and it breaks it down by individual segment. And the orange ones are ones that were returned, and it breaks it down by individual segment. Now, I'm not arguing this is a good visual, but it come in handy later. Now, there's another way you can do that. You can actually click both of these, and then I'm going to press and hold the control key, we'll drag both of them at a time. That's going to do the exact same thing. And the last one is you can put one on there, and then you can drag this and then hold the shift key and drop, and then it'll do the exact same thing. So add a detail, then change it, hit control and multi-select and drag them, or put one on and then shift and drag the other one. Ken mentioned this bowling dashboard. This is the actual dashboard I built for my son's bowling team, and something's wrong. I've got this parameter that allows me to highlight, but somehow the values are gone. All these parameters are empty. So we can fix that. I should feed this in for my data, but we can't always do that. So I'm going to feed it in from this list of names that I have in Excel. So I hit copy, and I'm just going to follow the directions of this parameter. It says click to add, right? I'm going to just hit Control V to paste. Well, shoot. It has all the different names into one of them. So that's obviously not what we want. So if we want to paste in a list of values from, say, Excel into a parameter, the key is that you need to do what it doesn't say. It says click to add. Do not click there to add. Click anywhere else to add. I'm going to click out here in this white space and then hit Control V, and it'll paste that list of values in there. So the key is where it says click to add, don't click there to add. All right. That's silly. Tips. This is a visualization I did years back showing win streaks for baseball teams. And so if we hover over, say, this mark here, we can see we're looking at the Texas Rangers. It was game number 108, and it's the Diamondbacks, and they won, right? So we see this winning streak of 4. What's driving me crazy is the alignment of this tooltip. Hopefully it's driving you all crazy. So if we zoom into this and we look at this tooltip, I like to put these sort of separator marks in between just to separate elements. And what happens is it changes sort of the indentation here. To make it a little more clear, we see the value starting here or here or here, and it makes this really difficult to read. So one little thing that I like, there's two tips in this section. First off, you do not need to go to the sheet to edit the tooltip. All you need to do is go to Worksheet Tooltip, right? And then you can edit the tooltip. And the second part of the tip is I can select this whole thing. And anybody remember like WordPerfect from 1992? Remember this? Well, we can just slide this thing over, create this indentions wherever we want. And now if I hover over this tooltip, they're all starting at the same point. I didn't do a very good job of aligning it, but you can see where all those different values start at the same indentation point. And just to compare, this is the original, this is the second. And instead of these offset indentions, we have the consistent indentions. Just a much cleaner look. Easier for your end users to read that information than having these sort of offsetting starting points. All right, so this is just a dashboard that's showing some information about a company. Yeah, people, a survey, and people love the culture and the flexibility, but they're not getting paid enough, right? So it's just these little icons that are red or blue. And if we take a deeper look at this, we can see that we've got this weird container layout. We've got a horizontal container, and it's containing 3 horizontal containers, and then we just have the one sheet within each horizontal container. To make this a little more clear, we have this light gray outer container. Then we have these, I'm calling unnecessary containers, because the containers are meant to hold multiple sheets. This container is just holding one sheet, right? Just pay, just flexibility. And then we have the sheets inside, right? So what if I wanted to get rid of these unnecessary containers? I could go in here and try and delete these, and it's just a pain. There's this weird little trick. If I hover over my cursor here and see this little double arrow, which we're not used to seeing, then I right click, there's this weird option to combine layout containers. Watch what happens when I do this. Boom, those things just got combined, and we can see that we have one less container here. So let's try this again here. Boom, combine layout containers, and we've just removed that entire layer of these dark gray unnecessary containers. We just have one horizontal container with the sheets inside of it. My dog is yapping her head off, so hopefully you can't hear that. Last one, same general workbook, right? We've got this.
We can't hear it this time, though, Kev. Normally not. Normally we can't hear it, but today we can.
She's losing her mind. So there's probably some neighbor walking by and she's guarding the house. So we've got these two different metrics, pay and flexibility. And we have these circle marks. They're actually shapes, these little custom shapes I created. And let's just say I just want to make these all slightly smaller, right? So I made that one smaller. So now I need, in this sheet, I need to go make this one smaller. Let's make that smaller. And shoot, this one's way smaller than that one. So I got to come back here and let's get it a little bit larger. I can pretty much guarantee from experience, this is probably going to take you about the rest of the day to get these things the exact same size. It'll drive you insane, but there's a solution. I'm going to go and open this dashboard in web edit. And I should be clear here, you know, the only real way to make these consistent is if we hit these 50% or the 25% snap, but 25% is too small, 50% is too big, right? If I go to web edit and I can just go to this dashboard and click edit, it's loading. I'm going to go to this individual sheet and go to size, and guess what happens? I can enter a percentage. Yay. So let's just change this to 35%. Let's go to flexibility. Let's change this to, I didn't click it. Go to flexibility. We go to size, change this to 35. And we can, in just 2 seconds, can get these things to be the exact same size. Yay. Thank you. Wish they would do that in desktop as well. All right. That is it for us, and this is being recorded. You can get the blog post related to this at flurledgetwins.com/coolstuff 2024, and it's on demand at Salesforce Plus. Thanks for having us. Hopefully you all are coming to Tableau Conference, and you can check out us doing some brand new content at Tableau Conference for how to do cool stuff in Tableau 2025. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this was super amazing. So thank you so much, Kevin, Ken, and Ada, and the team. See you at the conference.
All right. Thank you so much for having us.
Everyone. Bye.
Yeah. Thank you so much, guys.